Awesome.
Welcome to Do It for the Gram and Enneagram podcast with your host, certified Enneagram coach Milton Stewart, where we do it for the Enneagram, not Instagram. We make moves to improve our lives and those in our community. I'm excited to have this guest on today. I have seen Michael from afar. I have never, this is actually our
Okay,
first time
cool.
meeting. I've
Yes, it
seen
is.
from
It
afar
is.
on Instagram. So let me
Mm-hmm.
let me let me give a little bit of bio about Michael, and I'm excited to dive into this episode because the topic we're jumping into is so important. And so, Michael Shahan is a licensed marriage and family therapist practicing at Moss and Main Therapy Group in Kansas City, Missouri. He specializes in integrating the Enneagram into therapy, using it as a tool to help his clients work through trauma, find empathy and compassion for themselves, and move toward growth. He's also the author of the Enneagram in Practice course. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank
Well,
you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm really excited about this.
yes, it is so good to meet you. So something that you're like very interested in sharing, teaching,
Mm,
helping people understand is how mistyping actually happens first, why it actually matters, and then
mm.
how type 6 is often misunderstood in different ways. So before we jump into that wonderful content, I'm actually
Mm.
fascinated, just as my personal curiosity.
Okay.
How did the Enneagram find you? How did you find Enneagram? How was that for you?
Yeah, I was in grad school to be a therapist, 2015 to 2017, and I had learned about the Enneagram during that time at some random podcast. And then I had sort of looked a little bit into it, mistyped as a two, didn't really dive into it further. And then after I graduated, I was working with a client system, a couple, husband and wife, and they were having troubles communicating and understanding where they were coming from. And then they mentioned the Enneagram one time, and they said, I think I'm an eight and he's a one. And we heard this podcast about what that means. And I remember her saying, and my jaw dropped to the floor. And I understood, oh, that's why he does that. I always thought it was this, but now he does this. And I remember like in that session thinking, this thing, whatever the Enneagram thing is, it's like doing my job for me. It's like helping them communicate and helping them understand each other. And like, so this thing seems awesome. And so that's kind of really when I took like a headfirst dive into it, seeing just how helpful it can be for clients in like therapy work. And so ever since then, I've just gone on the deep end and stayed there for the last like 8 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, because I think you've built a really solid, from just looking at you online, like a really solid community around the way you integrate therapy and the Enneagram
Yeah.
together. And
Yeah.
so
Uh-huh.
I love how you say it. It's like doing my job for me. Like
Yes. Yes. It's awesome. Like I'm always
I
looking for that stuff.
I feel you. I feel you on that because it makes things so. It's like, well, this is the reason here. Like it makes so much sense.
Perfect sense. Yep.
So all right, so let's talk about this because I think a lot of times we talk about mistyping, and there are quite a few people who are mistyped, and there's so many reasons why
Mm-hmm.
a person can be mistyped, and you definitely know this as a therapist. So I'm excited to get into this because I think it's
Yeah.
important to one walk through your personal experience, but also how could this relate to a person who maybe either they just figured out they're mistyped, they may have
Mm.
shame about being mistyped,
Yes.
right, or they're just kind of teetering maybe
Mm.
not. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm fascinated to just hear you, what's been your journey with understanding mistype and what's going on with your
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah. You want me I can start with like how I realized I was mistyped and maybe like talk to bits of
Yeah.
those questions. Okay, cool. So I thought it was a social nine, a social dominant nine, or the teamer. Like, I listened to your last episode about the instincts, and I had never heard that language. So I like that language. I thought it was a social dominant nine, um, and for years. And I taught the Enneagram, and I made this platform about being like this teacher and coaching and stuff. And thinking I was a nine, a social nine, because they can be really similar. They can look. They can. Yeah. So we'll talk about that here soon. But so I thought I was a nine, and then was asked to be on this research group with this guy named Frederick Cohn, who's doing writing research on the subtypes, writing a book on all 27 subtypes. And I joined the social nine group, and there's a small part of me that in that Zoom call, it was going to be like several Zoom calls where they're just talking to us, asking questions. And I sort of started, there's a part of me that I was barely aware of that was like, I don't think these are my people. These people are very slow, not slow in a bad way, but like these people don't go at the like speed that I go at. And they're very
Yes.
calm and like they're kind of how I wish I was, but they actually
Right,
are
right,
that
right.
way. And then the leader of the study afterwards emailed me and said, "Hey, we need to like, sorry, this is uncomfortable, but for the sake of the research, we need to talk. Like, I think you might be mistyped." And then like instant stomach drop, like, no, 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 I hope that's not the case. Oh my God. Like I've two things I've prided myself on is knowing the Enneagram and knowing myself. And it feels like, and it felt like in
Yeah.
that moment that like that was all taken away. And oh my, I don't know
Wow.
anything. And what am I even doing? And if I can't even know myself, how can other people trust me? And what was interesting is what I started to do was watch instead of kind of just being reactive to it. I was wanting to watch how I reacted to that information. Does that make
Mhm.
sense? Like
Yeah.
how do I find myself naturally processing this information that I may be mistyped? And working with him, I had a couple Zoom calls with him, that the guy who did the study, asking more specific questions, narrowing it down, and realized just the way I was handling it was I have to figure this out. He's an expert, and he said this, and so probably he's right, and I need to figure this out, and I need to look into
Mhm.
this, and just a very six way of handling it. And so eventually
Right.
realizing that I'm a six, which it isn't like some people might take from that wow, he must have been so healthy that he thought he was a nine the whole time, but I don't think that's actually the case. I think it's actually
Mhm.
more of I was using my three arrow to like almost self-deceive into believing that I am a nine. I am relaxed. I
Gotcha.
am easygoing, if that makes sense. Because
Right, right, right.
in my past marriage, got divorced a couple years ago. My ex-wife was very anxious, and it was easy for me in a very contrarian six way to be like, "Oh, you're the anxious one. I'm not. Like you're so anxious. I'm not." And so it almost blinded me to it for a long time, and I really wasn't even aware of just how often the extreme amount of worst case scenario thinking and
Mhm.
but and getting a lot of clarification about the six helped too. One thing I had always heard taught was that sixes want safety and security, whereas his language is they need certainty. And that
Mhm.
really clicked in me huge. Like I'm always wanting certainty. Is this how I do this? How do you do this? How does one do this? Is this the right way to do things? I'm not sure. Like just recognizing
Right.
how much of my personality is like a bid for certainty or how much of my
Mhm.
personality comes from a lack of certainty. So yeah, that eventually it probably took about 2 or 3 months to fully land and say to myself, even like, yeah, I think I'm a six. I think I was wrong the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just it was a very difficult moment, like an identity crisis, almost a bit of like an ego death in a way. Like,
Yeah.
does that make sense? Like, I thought I was
Yeah.
this, but maybe I'm not actually.
So can you walk me through maybe how did you walk through that journey? Because that's not easy. Like
Yeah. Okay.
I want
Mm,
people to understand, right? Like as a person like you, me, other teachers, other people, we're still
mm.
trying to do our inner work while helping other
Yes.
people do their inner work.
Always. Yes.
And so how did you walk through that journey inside of yourself? What aided you? What helped you? Because I want other
Mm.
people to, you know, think about other resources or something that they may have. What helped you through?
Yeah. Ah, that's a really good question. I don't think anybody's asked me that before. um, um, what helped me was having one like kind of practical piece that helped is that somebody I started dating, she's a nine. And I just started seeing more and more like, I am not like you. Like, I just want
Okay.
to think about stuff and do stuff. And you could literally sit there, do nothing for hours, and like, you're fine with it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I just like, that is not me. And so some of that, but also like helping with the typing, but getting through, I think one of the those important things for me was to recognize, almost to be aware in like a meditative way of what's happening to me right now. Like recognizing
Mhm.
I am struggling with a sense of identity. What I always sort of hung my hat on, I don't know if that's true anymore. And so of course I'm freaking out. Of course
Right, right.
this is so a lot of like compassion for myself and understanding versus shaming myself. I think that really helped kind of recognizing I see clients go through identity crisis all the time as a therapist.
Right.
Like this person thought they were this, but oh, there's this part of them that they didn't realize and it's really hard to look at and I've just seen that happen and how difficult that is for like the human ego. And so I think knowing that helped recognize like I understand what's happening. It's painful and I don't really know maybe what type I am, but it makes sense why this is so hard for me. So I think compassion for my own mistyping was hugely important. Um,
Yeah.
it's hugely important. Also, having some, I don't know what else helped. My partner was really supportive in the process. It was interesting. Some of the people closest to me were very defensive right away. They're like, "Well, what does that guy know? Like,
Mm.
you're not. What does he know?" And I was like, "Well, a lot. He's an expert. So like, don't just get defensive." And so people's defensiveness was interesting, and it was almost like I felt very supported by that, even though I don't know, I would remind them like, hey, I don't need defensiveness, like I just need like your
Right.
input kind of right now on like you don't need to like protect my feelings, but I would love
Yeah.
your input on how these things actually come out and what you see in me and stuff like that. So we had a lot of compassion, a lot of understanding of what's happening. Yeah, like an awareness, an acceptance. I think that's a good way to say it. An acceptance of the difficulty that I was going through. I think really helped, even though it was hard. There was weeks of,
Yeah.
man. Even my partner even told me like you're. She noticed I was very in my head for 2 or 3 weeks, almost like distant, almost like in a way that I normally am not, because I was just spinning and trying to figure it all out, which itself was kind of a clue of my sickness, or at least my
Right.
being a head type.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah, does that make sense? Those answers?
Yeah, those are great
Yeah.
because you talk about one having compassion, which people need to have. If you're going through a mistyping crisis or any a crisis or identity crisis, the
Yes.
compassion's got to kick in.
Yep.
One, um, literally, and you also talked about something that was also interesting is you took time to actually try to figure this out.
Yeah.
And the other piece is like our friends and people who like know us when they hear something is different about us that we like, well, maybe it's not. And like they got defensive
Mm,
instead of curious. And so
yeah.
that can be interesting for people who are going through,
Mm,
mistyping or trying to figure it out because your friends around you are basically giving you a certain bias. They're like, yeah, you're
yeah.
this. It's
Yes.
like, wait, hold up.
Absolutely.
Let me figure it out. Hold up, hold up, hold up.
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
you point to a very important point, and I think too, what you're doing is very brave to even like to
Mm,
share it in such a
thank
strong way. I
you.
think it's brave and no, the better word, courageous.
Courageous. There it is. The
Let's
six.
be
There it
honest.
is. Yes. I
It's
love it.
it's
I love
it's
that.
courageous, right?
Mm,
So
thank you.
that is
Mm,
awesome. The other piece is okay, so you mentioned coming around to the six, right? And learning
hmm
a little bit more around because different words like safety and security is a word that people tend to use, but safety and
hmm
security is kind of it's so broad and big. Like
Yeah. Yes.
you could technically say every type is doing what they're doing for safety and security in a way. So
Sure.
it makes it a
Sure.
little
Yeah. That's a great point.
dodgy.
It's a great
So
point.
can you explain a little bit more around like your discovery of the sixness within you and
Mm,
how
mm.
people can tend to confuse and get sixes like misunderstood in different ways?
Yeah, man, that's a great because that was such a big part of it. Like, kind of really, I hadn't really fully understood the depths of what sixes are and what that looks like. I think, this really so when I started realizing and learning what the six looks like, actually, it made a lot of sense. One thing that I've noticed a lot, and that Frederick I noticed a lot, is that sixes want to be nines. They want to be easygoing and relaxed. Like that's like the goal, right? But they really aren't actually internally. They can look like it. A lot of sixes look very prepared and easygoing and steady, but inside they are anything but.
Right.
And so recognizing what being a head type means was a huge part of it. So I thought I was a body type, which is a nine, right? And I thought that was because I feel a lot of things bodily, which kind of made sense to me. But when I really think about the head type situation, I was learning a lot from Russ Hudson's newest audiobook during that time, and he
Hmm.
sort of talks about really dives into the centers of intelligence in a way I hadn't heard before. And he talked about the head types needing to think it through and having the sense of I need to figure things out. I don't know what I'm doing. Do you know what you're doing? How can I be certain about this? Like I need to think it through and like recognizing I love thinking about stuff. Like I just love thinking about new concepts and learning things and like
Yeah.
my partner's a nine, and like I've never said this directly, but this like a dynamic we have a lot is like, do you want to keep thinking about this and talking about this? And she's basically
Mm.
like, not really. Like I just want to like hang out. Like that doesn't seem as important to me to think all those things through. And to me, it feels
Right.
fun and important, and I live so much in my head. And that was one of the bigger pieces, kind of recognizing just what a head type means. Just how many
Mhm.
thoughts and recognizing, okay, yeah, actually, here's one really great moment that I realized my sixness. So I was invited to be a part of like a adult like softball league. And I hadn't played baseball since high school. And so I
Okay.
was driving 30 minutes up to this place for the first game, and I recognized I was like just spinning a million miles an hour. Like, should I play outfield? Because usually in these leagues, people can't catch pop flies. But what if I can't anymore? Should I ask to be second base? That's a pretty fast. Boom, 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 boom. And I
Right.
remember
Right.
realizing, like, whoa, hold on. I think I'm doing that thing that I teach that sixes do. What would happen if I just stay present and like try not to think about that? And as I did that, I started feeling this like stomach dropping fear. And I think I like,
Mm.
which I think that those thoughts about what I was going to do was trying to manage that fear. And so I
Yeah.
would think so much historically that I didn't even really get in contact with the fear that was underlying in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
100%.
so,
Yes.
yeah, I remember realizing like, oh, this is uncomfortable. Like this stomach dropping fear
Yeah.
feels not great. Like no wonder I think to try to like resolve that. I try to mitigate that by thinking things through and how things will happen.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so that was a big moment for me recognizing, oh, I think it is fear. I think there's a lot of fear down there, more than I ever wanted to realize.
Yeah.
Um, and it's hard to see with sixes, especially another thing I think that kept me kind of blind to it was being a male in our culture. There's
Mm.
a lot of
Yeah.
men don't want to be seen as anxious. Anxious or fearful is seen as weak, right? It's not a masculine
Right.
trait. You
Right.
need to be fearless, and you need to. And so my two brothers are a 3 and an 8, and my dad is a 7. And so all this assertive type energy
Wow.
around me, right? Yes, and then realizing
Wow.
so a lot of that, and then recognizing growing up, I just think I had this part of me that's like, oh, like they're not afraid. They do this. Like I can't be that way. This is what men do. Men aren't afraid. I'm not
Mm.
afraid. And then so early
Right.
on, I think is when I really started shoving down my awareness of my own fear. And one of the probably one of the biggest things that has come from this mistyping is recognizing just how much fear runs the show. Especially as a
Yeah.
self-preservation six. It's a double whammy. You have the
I
self-preservation
knew it.
fear. Dude,
I knew it. I
it's
felt you.
hard.
I listen, I had a feeling in my head. My head was already trying to pinpoint. I was like, I wonder
Okay.
which
Oh, nice. Okay.
and but
Okay.
when you said self-pres, I said, yeah, I said that's what I was coming to. I was like, I bet he's a self-pres six. I got a feeling.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
I get it. I have a question for you because recognizing the fear, what has been some
Mm,
things you've done to help you manage the fear? Because as a
mm.
seven, self-pres seven, when we do the work, we like, Gad Lee, how much fear is actually
Yes.
there? It's
Yes.
running.
God, same. Same. Like, is it all just fear? Like, it's
basically,
jeez.
basically.
Yes. So how do I? So how have I learned to manage it? Is that what you're kind of
or, or
saying?
or or just work with it at this point.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it has been even before I mistyped, I had been since my divorce kind of recognizing that I am more of an anxious person than I realized. And so I was kind of already on the
Mhm.
road of sort of recognizing some of my own anxiety. Um, um, so how did I deal with what was the question again? I want to make sure I answer this well.
Yeah. How do you manage or work
Mm,
or process with the fear you've noticed
the
that it's
fear.
like, yeah.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing is an acceptance of the fear. I think more than anything,
Mm.
a realization that the goal is not to get rid of the fear, right? Because that's such a
Right.
sixth thing. I don't want to be afraid. I want to do things to make sure I'm not afraid, which is just still fear based. And so
Yep.
this acceptance of like, God, all the way down, I think this is fear, especially with the self-preservation doubled up, right? With the six, the self-preservation has a lot of fear and scarcity,
Hmm.
and then with the fear, it's this like doubt of my own doubt, and I can't even really trust myself, and I assume that everybody else is right, and even recognizing kind of what looked like humility in me was actually a lot of fear. I was like, oh no, you do it. You're better at this than me. Like it can look like humility, but I think it's
Yeah.
really fear-based in a lot of ways, and so learning about my own fear and the ways that it showed up, and what it does to me and the kinds of thoughts that it spits out and like how I feel when it's that way, and just really have almost developing an eye for it for my own fear, like
Yeah.
inviting it, like what's the phrase, inviting your demons to tea. Have you heard that phrase before?
Hmm.
So it's kind of like bringing in this part of me, seeing it for what it is, and kind of accepting it. Like this is probably going to be a struggle my whole life, and so like, what do I do about that? And can that be okay? I think was it
Yeah.
like that has to be okay. That has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, recognizing that is huge. Recognizing, just accepting and seeing, right? Having an awareness of it and a compassion for it, I think have been likely the biggest factors, which is honestly what I work with all my clients around. It's one of my main pieces
Yeah,
of therapy work is you need self-compassion and self-awareness. Only one without the other creates its own problems in each way.
that's right.
It becomes unbalanced. And so having both, I think, is really key to really being with yourself and be able to integrate these parts of you that you've sort of disintegrated from, right? And sort of
Yep.
pushed away as you've grown up, and to do that courageously, um, even when it's hard.
Yeah. And I think you speak of something and like the self-pres six, I say they have like triple fear sometimes, like in the sense of like, center of intelligence, type structure or passion, and
Yeah. Okay.
literally self-praise. So I've said to a degree, it's like
Triple.
almost
It's
like
triple
a
whammy.
triple to a degree. But there comes gifts with every single piece of us that when we
Mm,
integrate
mm.
it, right? There comes these gifts every single time. So
Yes.
one, I,
Hmm.
I love the word acceptance because I think this is a piece of not just for sixes who've mistyped, but in general,
Mm.
sometimes we mistype or people have mistyped where there's a part of them they don't want to accept. And it's like, no,
Exactly. Yes.
I'm not
Yes.
like that. No.
Yep.
Um, and so I think what our society, you mentioned this earlier, I think what our society and the way that it has structured, specifically one, to how men are supposed to show up,
Mm.
which when you reach down beneath the depths of all these men who haven't dealt with fear, we're all fearful.
Yes.
we just
Yes.
we just
Yes.
have
Don't tell
interesting
anyone.
ways of showing
Yeah.
it.
Sure. Sure.
um, but at the same time, I think we're conditioned, even in this country, like Western society, let me say that and more in general, it's more three based to a degree. And
Mm.
it's also more like I have to look a certain way or be a certain way. And so we miss out on the gifts. So people who may be
Mm.
sixes or certain types that may struggle, you know what I'm saying, with a culture that's unhealthy in the
Mm.
area, they have to kind of fight with it. So it feels like it's not something that is helpful and that everybody needs to a degree. And the thing about it
Mm.
is like the ability to think through things is something that we clearly need now. And we've been needed think about it. I mean you really think
Yeah.
about it, like the ability to really stop and to think through stuff, like really think through it before we move into action, is something we have been missing for a long time
Mm.
collectively,
Mm.
and something I think individually we miss in the way that we do some things as a society. So I want to, one, shine that gift on that sixes bring to a space, but also ask you the question. So you've noticed the things, obviously the shadows that you have to work on as a six.
Mm.
What
Mm.
have been some of the gifts or some of the like
Mm.
strength that you've started to see show up as you're like, oh, that is a strength, right, from me? So what are some things that have shown up in that way for you?
Man, that's a really good question. I might even get emotional when sharing this part because just even
It's
thinking
all
about that
good.
started. I think, man, some of the strengths, I think, first off, just my curiosity. I think almost more than anything, I'm driven by an intense curiosity to figure things out. How do things work? What's this like? Where did this come from? How does this fit together? Which can be fantastic. It makes me a great therapist, right? I'm able to see things in
Mhm.
people and patterns that aren't working for them and seeing what's going on in ways that other people can't. Like, I
Yeah.
just notice patterns and I'm curious in a way, and I really like that about me. So I think that's a huge strength. I think a huge strength is my curiosity, and I think another strength is like of being a six and even realizing that I had been doing a lot of my own self growth work without the quote right map for years. Does that
Mhm.
like actually instilled like a lot of confidence in me? Like, oh wow, like even when I had the quote
Mhm.
wrong map, I was still moving in the right direction. Like I know what I'm doing. I
Yep.
clearly know what I'm doing in some way, theoretically. But
Yeah.
like that was a huge piece for me and really encouraging for me. And I think the thing that I think is also a strength is like the yeah, I mean, yeah, this is what I was getting teary-eyed about, but it also comes with like this weird like threes and nines hate to be seen as vain or like better than at all. There's this sort of anti-narcissist contract that Russ Hudson says threes and nines, sorry, sixes and nines sign at birth. Like I don't want to be that way. And so for me to say this is a bit uncomfortable, but I think my courage, especially with like saying I am a six and here's what's going on and here's what you can learn from that. Like everybody said I was brave, but it's hard to really agree with him, especially at first. But there's
Mm,
moments where I can think that was really courageous. Like it wasn't easy, but it
mhm.
almost felt like it wasn't an option to not go through with that. Which first
Yeah,
I remember talking to my partner, like, well, it didn't feel like an option. Like it feels like I had to do this. And my partner was like, yeah, that's brave. That's what maybe bravery is. Like feeling
yeah,
like it's important to do. And even if it's difficult, I'm going to do it. And so like even highlighting my own courage and where that shows up. Because sixes forget that all the time. We're so focused on where we've
yeah,
gone wrong and what we
yeah.
need to do better. We don't better ourselves because we don't remember. We don't give much focus onto the things that we've done that are good or
Mhm.
courageous or powerful. And so I think just even highlighting that as part of this transition and seeing how that shows up for me in a real way has been really encouraging too.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's one of the um a couple episodes before this one. I don't know if you listened to one of my best friends, D Gibbs. He's a 1 to 1 6. But it took him a
The sexy
while.
six episode. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. So it took him a while to come
To
to
see it
the
was fear.
realization.
Yeah.
Exactly. And to know that like there's so many gifts that comes with like
Mm,
just him showing up in the presence of something. Like and similar to
mm,
what you said, like the best part about it is that even like the wrong map or not knowing the
mm,
right quote unquote type enneagram structure, but the fact that you've always already been doing the work so deeply
mm,
that
hmm.
soon as you like turn the map just a little bit,
Yes,
it
yes.
was like,
That's a great way to put
oh,
that. Oh, this is so cool. It's like
now
having glasses for the first time,
right.
almost kind of.
It's
Yes,
right.
yes, yes,
So it's like, oh, now I can grow even more exponentially because
yes,
now it
yes.
all clicks even better. So yeah, just hats
That's
off to
a
that because
thanks. And the clicking better, like I think that's such a part of the mistyping thing too. Like even speaking to mistyping in general, like there is this, oh wow, it clicks. Like, oh, it's like having glasses for the first time. This makes sense now. But there's also this, oh no, like I don't want this to be a part of me. That's not great. Because usually we don't want to be
right,
the type that we actually are. There's this sort of aversion of
right.
to our ego even seeing it because it wants to keep doing what
Yep.
it's doing. And so, like, yeah, there's in equal parts, oh, this clicks. On the other side, there's this, oh no, like, oh, is it really fear?
Hmm.
That sucks. Was my first reaction. Like, oh, that's weak. That's, oh no, I'm a wuss. I'm a wimp. Like, that's like when I first had that realization, there was such a heavy wave of that kind of shame coming over me that I
Hmm.
noticed when I first really started settling into six. But I think moving through that is what led me to the acceptance of it in
Yeah.
reality.
Yeah. And and honestly, and in all honesty, that's what people need in a
Mm.
good and great therapist and
Yeah,
or
yeah.
coach. They
Mm,
need a person who is honest about their own inner work and humble enough to share the inner work that they're in the way that they're doing it. Because
yeah.
if the opposite, when we're not humble, when we're not able to do our own inner work, we don't actually be able to really ask the really good questions, to really go deeper,
Yeah,
to help
sure.
to create space for them to be as vulnerable as they can because we're not creating spaces safe enough because we haven't become safe enough internally.
Yes,
So,
exactly. That vulnerability begets vulnerability is what I say with my clients.
yeah,
Like, how could I sit here and expect you to be vulnerable with me if you know nothing about me, if I'm some sort of robot? Like, that doesn't
right,
work. There's not a safety created there. I think you're so right
right.
on that.
So I just hats off to you. Like it's just
Thank you.
I mean, it's a big deal, like, on so many levels. On the level as being, like, type 6, yes, but also on the level as having, like, a certain platform, that's a big
Mm,
deal,
mm.
because the ego can wanna do its own thing in a lot of different ways, so, just hats off to you for that,
Thanks. Thanks.
and being able to share it. Another
And
question. Go ahead. No, go
oh,
ahead.
there's another part of six that I'd love to speak to that I think people get
Oh,
wrong
throw
a
it
lot.
in.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So the part of people, I think this phrase sums up a kind of in like a short way. It's sixes aren't necessarily worst case thinkers; they're worst case preppers. So the idea that when a six thinks of
Mm.
all these worst case scenario, they don't really think every single one of those is going to happen. but it's this
Hmm.
just in case it might happen, just in case I want to have it thought about it. So an example of this, like the other day, I had this jade plant, this succulent, it's taken like 7 years to grow and it's getting big. And I was talking to my partner, I was like, hey, by the way, if there's a fire in our apartment, I want you to take Jade with you out if I'm not here. That's important. Like, I don't really actually at all think there's going to be a fire, but just in case, I want to go over this so that I'm okay then, which is that six.
Yeah.
I don't trust my future self to do these things and handle things, so I need to make sure I'm prepped. So it's not necessarily worst case thinking, meaning I think all these bad things are going to happen. With a lot of trauma and a lot of more anxiety, it can be that way. But the core of it isn't necessarily just, I think these bad things are actually going to happen. It's just in case I need to think it through and be prepared for it. Does that make sense? I think those are very different things, and people don't really recognize that in the six.
I like the nuance you put on that. You just shared about that because one thing when working like at the IEA, I work with very closely with our admin team, and the leader, she's a
Yeah.
six, and it's great because the
Sure,
six and
sure.
I'm telling you, the six and the seven pairing, like we
Yeah,
handle
my
both.
supervisor post grad was
Oh
a
my
seven for
gosh,
years and just an incredible working relationship.
we handle situations beautifully. But one thing that's always important is like to hear out what is actually going through the thinking process of the six, and like, okay, what things should we probably prepare for
Mm-hmm.
just in case. And so let's make sure we honor that, you know. And so that's been a growth lesson for me throughout the years of learning of like when I'm working with sixes,
Mm,
like, oh, it's like, okay, let's prepare. It's not necessarily
okay,
that I doom and gloom gonna do everything, but
sure,
let's at least one hear them out, and then
sure, okay.
if we can create a plan or do something quick to prepare for, let's just put it out there just
Almost
in
like a
case,
why
you know.
not kind of thing, like just in case.
Yeah,
Yeah, sure, sure.
why
Yeah.
not? And so I think you're talking to a point that is important about sixes, where sixes, from my experience, aren't looking necessarily for a situation to go bad. They're trying to
Mm.
figure out how to mitigate all the ways it could go bad so it will go well.
I want to be prepped for it. I want to do this well. There's such
Yeah.
a loss of, Russ Hudson talks about these essential qualities. There's a loss of, for the six,
Mhm.
inner guidance early on in life. The guide,
Yeah.
so not necessarily
Yeah.
knowing what to do with life, but knowing that I will know what to do when life hits me. That's what, like, this inner
Mhm.
GPS, that's what the six loses. And so disconnected from that, the six needs to, oh, well, I don't trust future me to take care of this. That guy's just like, I don't trust him. So I need to think everything through so that he can have a better shot. And so that worst case thinking is coming from this loss of inner guidance at the core. And I just think
Yeah.
that's what six is at the core. Like they can look so in that so many different iterations of what that looks like, but there's that like that's the core of the six. So many
Yeah.
different, which is why a lot of mistyping
So
happens with sixes.
yeah. Oh yeah. And plus when
Partially
you
why.
don't like, and the subtypes too add a whole different flavor. Oh my
Yes,
gosh.
yes, yes,
Like
yes.
I think sixes and fours, when they're talking about subtypes, though, they come in such a variety.
Yeah,
Like
yes.
they can look so different.
Mm. I was.
So
I-
different.
Have you seen the show Severance? People are talking about it
Oh
recently.
yeah.
Season two. Okay, so Dylan and Irv, the two office mates,
Hmm.
I think they're both sixes, but they look
Okay.
completely different. One is
Completely.
very
Hmm.
militant, like Prussian, very social six, and then
Yep.
Dylan's very sexual six, just like stick it to the man. Like, no, I'm suspicious of you.
Hmm.
Like, I can't trust you. I'm like, so it's like they look so different as a character, but I think I would guess that they're both sixes, which I think is just a great example of that.
I
That
love
makes
that. I
sense?
love that. Oh, that makes total
Mm.
sense. This is good. So I have a question for you. So
Yeah.
with the map that you've turned and all the inner work you've been doing, um, what does Michael look like in 2 years?
Ooh, those are those are hard. Those are man, those can be hard questions to think about for a six because it can be scary to let myself hope that good things might be happening in 2 years because what if it doesn't? Like that doubt, that fixation of the
Hmm.
six, prepping myself to like to be hurt less if things go wrong by thinking it'll go wrong, which doesn't actually work. It just makes you struggle and suffer now.
Yeah.
And then your future you isn't very prepped because you're super anxious walking into it. But who am- who am I in 2 years? Is that the question you ask, or where do I see
Yeah.
myself
Yeah.
in 2 years?
Yeah. In 2 to 5 years, now that you have the map turned, um,
Mm.
in an
I
area for
think,
you?
yeah, I think more than anything, having even more and more of an understanding of how my anxiety works. And because what I've been able to do
Mhm.
more lately in bits and pieces is have this thought, almost be able to challenge this thought. Like, well, if I say this, if I don't text this person back, they're going to be upset. Like, whoa, is that true? Maybe that's actually not true. Maybe that belief that I have is actually just anxiety in my way to prep for the future. Maybe that's not actually real. And that the
Mm.
more that happens in my life, the more like, oh, the more like free I feel. Like, to be honest, like it's such a
Yeah,
load off of my chest and my shoulders when I know like,
there you go.
oh yeah, oh, I forgot. Like, I forgot. That may not happen. If it does, I can be okay. Like,
Hmm.
God, what a relief that is. But when I'm fixated and I'm in my sick space, just sort of hunched over, trying to figure it all out, like I don't get to experience that freedom, that
Yeah.
deep breath of like I'm okay. And so when I look to the future, I don't know exactly what it'll look like practically. Hopefully I'll be, I don't know, like I mean, I have some practical ideas of where I might want to be, but more than anything, I want to be able to have an even better relationship with my anxiety, be able to recognize
Mm.
even more what's fear and what's truth. Because sixes can think they're being very logical, but it is just fear. It sounds
I
like
am.
right? They think they're so logical, and the logic sometimes sounds like, well, they're
Oh
not telling us
gosh.
everything, so that makes you think. Doesn't it? That makes you think like, no, that's not at all logic. You're just
Oh
you're what could
gosh.
be in the dark. That's what you're saying.
You're 100% on point. Oh gosh, I've experienced that. Oh yes. Oh
Have you?
yes.
Okay, they think they're so
From people I
logical.
love. Yes. I'm like,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
is it though? But
And
okay.
and so
Oh,
being able to recognize my anxiety, I think will help me decipher, right, more when I'm not reactive to that anxiety. It helps me gain access to wisdom and logic in more like in a better way than what I think is wisdom when it's really just
yeah.
fear, survival instincts.
Yeah. Yeah. So like more freedom, more energy, more wisdom. I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
sure. More comfortable in my own
so
skin too. Yeah, yeah. I think that goes along
yes.
with that though.
So in the future, I wanted you to ask that question. I want to ask you that question because I want you to be able to look back at this episode in the
Oh,
future
okay.
and be
Yeah.
like, "Dang, it worked! It's happening!" Like I'm just like I'm doing it. I am it. I
Yeah.
become it. Like that's the one reason I wanted
Yes.
to do. I was like, this will
I
be
love that.
perfect.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate
Oh
that.
yeah,
That's
oh yeah,
exciting.
no
That's actually
problem.
that's really cool. That's really thoughtful.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
I'll do my
because
best to
you.
come at it with that much energy that you just did.
Oh yeah.
That much excitement.
You'll probably send me a message and be like, "Dude, it's real." I was like,
You're right.
"Yes,
You're right the whole
It
time.
worked. It worked." Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay, so what
Mm.
advice or nuggets of wisdom from your experience would you share with someone first who has mistyped, might be mistyped and going through that
Mm.
process? What would be your advice or encouragement for them?
Yeah. I think one big thing I'd say is that if you realize you might have mistyped, that does not mean you don't know yourself. Because I still knew myself a lot. I saw a lot of who I was. I just had different language for it. I sort of interpreted it differently. So one of my fears at first was like, oh my, this means I don't know myself at all. I must be somebody really different. I remember even thinking like, what if my partner like stops not liking me?
Mhm.
Like, because I'm different. I
Right.
remember thinking like, that's not why we started dating. She didn't say you're a nine, I'm a nine. That's why we're dating. Like, if you're six, we can't. Like, that's not what happened. Like, she fell in love with me, and that didn't
That's right.
change. That did not change
Right.
when I mistyped myself. And I think that's one of the most encouraging things. Like, it doesn't make you somebody different. It might feel that way. Your ego might get really reactive, but really all you're doing
Yeah.
is seeing, like, shifting the map. And because we all have parts of every Enneagram number in us. It doesn't mean we're dumb because I have a lot of nine in me, right? It's that soul child, it's that growth path. And theoretically, I was born with a lot more of that. And so, of course, I resonate with it. Of course, I connect to
Right.
it in some ways. Um, so that's like a more encouraging thing. Another piece is subtypes. When you look at the instincts and you can recognize that, that is probably the biggest way to like fully type yourself if you're between certain things. Just hold
Yes.
it for me.
100%.
Okay, okay. And it's huge. That was one of the things that Frederick guy encouraged me to do. Like, let's look at your sub instinct first. What is your dominant instinct? And then, okay, now it's way easier to zone in on my type because I'm only picking from like. Does that make sense? Like it narrows where I'm
Oh
looking
yeah.
quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
So subtypes
Okay.
practically is a huge bit of advice, I think. Like looking into subtypes.
Yeah. Too important. And so
Yeah.
what advice or encouragement would you give someone who's just recognizing that they become a six? What would you give their type of encouragement or advice?
Even that, even the way you said it had become a six, which is interesting. That's the language I use. Or people are like, oh, you're a six now. And like, well, not really, but
Been
kind of like I've
right.
been a whole time. Not like
Yeah,
to like correct you, but I think that's like even the language, it feels like
it's
I think that's
important.
more evidence that it feels like it's somebody different, but it really isn't.
Yeah,
Even the language we use around it.
true.
Somebody who, so advice for somebody who realized that like, oh, actually I'm a six, not these other numbers. So you're saying, because that can happen a
Yeah,
lot. Twos, nines, like all over the place. They can be mistyped. Um, I don't know. What I get, because a lot of people like talk really poorly about the sixes, and I know I have a lot of six clients who will say like we're just the scapegoat of the Enneagram, which I think is not always true. Um, but there's a lot of I think a lot of people don't want to be sixes because it seems really bad because it's so based on worst case scenario thinking, and that's just must just be really anxious people. But like sixes are also very clever and very funny and very kind and very
hmm
smart, and
hmm
very really great to have as a friend and to have as a relationship and feel so. I think people feel very steady and supported and safe around sixes a lot of times because they're think there's like they can just feel that right because there's a even if the six doesn't feel that way internally. But I think the more the six can access that internally, the more other people can feel it around them. But I think there's just a lot of good things about the six, and it's been the one of the worst things that happened to me to realize I was mistyped, especially with my platform, and also easily one of the best things that ever happened to me. Like it's been
Yeah.
so helpful. It just exploded my own growth and my own awareness in ways that I really didn't think were possible. And so in the end, it's really good news. But like right death and resurrection and growth zoomed in can look like death but zoomed out it's an upward like right it's like a
Yeah.
upward movement actually and so I think recognizing that and recognizing that this feels really bad maybe or there may be a lot of shame or embarrassment or now I don't know myself but just reminding yourself even that that's temporary and this is actually going to open up even a
hmm
bigger avenue to learn about yourself and access even more compassion theoretically in the end.
Mm, I love that.
Thanks.
I listen. I love that. I mean, I always appreciate anyone who's done one who's doing and done their inner
Mm.
work.
Yeah, I could tell just by your podcast. I think you and I are very similar with that.
It's just you just have different levels of conversations and you get to
Mm.
be with people instead of just like operating on you
I
like
like that
be our beings.
because there's
So
like safe to. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, keep going. I like that though. I like that a
no,
lot.
you're good. No, you're good. No, you're good. You're good. You're good. And I could just hear and feel the energy and like the
Mm.
seriousness behind your own inner work. Um,
Mm.
so I just
Yeah.
I just thank you for your courageousness to share like your actual experience, right? And to do it from the lens and the standpoint and the platform and the
Mm.
influence that you have is such a big deal. Like,
Thank you.
so like I just want to once again honor that and thank
I
you for
appreciate
being
that.
on the show. And I also want to say like is there how can people connect with you, reach out to you, whatever you're doing? Can you share that real quick?
Yeah, yeah. So my website, michaelshahan.com, has all my stuff, like kind of a main hub with I have recorded courses on there. I have like these guided meditations following Russ Hudson stuff that I've done to connect each person to the essential like essential quality, which I really love, and that, and so my website holds all of that and has my blogs and things, but also where I show up big is on Instagram. Do a lot of Enneagram memes. So it's Michael Shahan underscore therapy is that account. So I do a lot of memes, take a lot of my therapy insights that I've learned from clients and working with them and because I just have such a passion for that, for teaching other people how to be the best version of themselves. And so I'm always just
Mhm.
dumping new information and concepts and stuff about self growth. So yeah, and I also another thing I'd love to add. I don't know when you get this podcast out, but next week um, I'm starting my next round of the Enneagram in practice, a course for therapists to use the Enneagram with our
Mm.
clients, therapists, social workers, nurses, people like that. I've had my course before, so I'm doing that. Also looking at doing a retreat sometime at the end of the year. Doing a lot of really cool things with that. But if you want to also have an email list. So if you ever like go
Mhm.
to my website and want to be on that, I send something out every Wednesday about some new Enneagram insight or something about sixes and stuff like that. So if you want to stay like more connected, that's definitely an option too.
Awesome. I'll make sure those are all in the show notes for everybody.
Yeah,
So
thank
go
you.
there, click those, learn more about what Michael has going on, because Michael has a lot going on.
Sure.
And he's doing a lot of deep work. So once again, I'd like to thank you for being on the show. For all those listening, just a reminder, like if you feel triggered, things come up, take a deep breath, make a better choice, and do it for the gram, the Enneagram, of course. And we'll see you in the next episode. Have a good one. Bye bye.